Today we have David Wolter, who is a story artist at Dreamworks and won the Student Academy Award last year, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you're following the line of some greats like John Lasseter and Pete Docter, and I think somebody from your studio won a Student Academy Award as well, Kathy Zielinski.
Yeah.
One of the
Glenn Harmon, too.
Oh,
Also
wow.
works here. Won a few years ago. So, yeah, it's rare company, for sure.
So thanks for doing this webinar. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself in terms of when it began, your love of animation and story?
Well, I really started out as a fan of cartoons, and I would kind of read the comic strip every morning in the paper and got into comic books after that. But it wasn't until I was about 12 and I first watched Batman the Animated Series that I started to really love animation. And I remember kind of freeze-framing through the opening credits scene. And there's this moment where Batman ducks a punch and then punches a criminal in the face. And there's this one, I was freezing through it, and there's this one frame where the screen was completely white. And I remember, like, my mind just being blown by the fact that I didn't even notice that. But when I freezed through it, there was magic in the individual frames. And that was, I think, the moment when I first felt the power of animation and first felt drawn to it. It took me a long time to come back to it. I went through a lot of other different phases, but that was kind of where it started for me. So
Cool. So when did you get into CalArts, and was the short film that won the Academy Award, was that your senior project?
No. Yes. Well, so I actually didn't go to CalArts until I was 28.
Okay.
So I had kind of a circuitous route to getting there, and I already had I had a previous degree actually before I arrived. So I was admitted as a second-year student, and I actually made Erie during my second year there. So I was technically a third-year student, but it was my second year there. It's kind of confusing, but it wasn't a senior project. It was kind of it was my second-year film. So.
Wow. So what did you get your previous degree in?
It was art actually. I was on a basketball scholarship. So I'm 6'10", so it kind of makes sense. And I was planning to study business, and I almost failed microeconomics and just felt like, you know what, maybe business is not for me. And kind of fell into art, rediscovered my love of cartooning, and so I majored in art. And I did a lot of ceramics and graphic design, drawings, traditional stuff like that.
So how many short films did you actually do before you did your final one that won the award, actually?
I did one.
Okay.
And it's online. It's on Vimeo. It's called Russ's Funk, and I'm not particularly proud of it. There's things about it that I like, but there's a scene in that movie where there's a fat man dancing uncontrollably and holding on to a telephone pole for safety, and at some point he has to let go of the pole and begin to dance and listen to the music. And for me, that was a metaphor of that year of study, where it was like I was trying to learn how to animate and make films all at the same time. And I had to let go of that pole, and I had to learn how to actually be a filmmaker. And I think Erie is when I kind of hit my stride and let go of the pole. That first film was kind of a learning experience for me.
How long did that film take? Your last film, Erie?
Well, I started pre-production in first semester, and it was due at the end of the year. So it was kind of one calendar or one school year, really, about 7 months.
So you had the story actually before you began production or pre-production.
Yeah, I was very intent on getting a story that I could really have confidence in. I wasn't worried about the end product looking pretty or polished. I really wanted the story to work well, so I spent probably the majority of the time, maybe 4 months, on just the story before I began production.
Can you give us some insight into your process of making the film that you made? Do you want to maybe show us some of your animatics or show us some of your sketches or character designs possibly? Or
yeah, I got an animatic here. Okay, so this is an animatic that I made, and for me, the animatic, which is just a series of storyboards cut together in a program to feel like film, is kind of the building blocks of filmmaking. And I ended up making 14 different versions of this animatic. This one's a little bit later in the process, so a lot of the shots are the same as my final film. But I'll just play this and talk about it as I go. You can see these drawings are very rough. And the idea here is to get the idea across as quickly as possible and not waste time making it pretty, just communicating the story idea. So there's even just scribbles, really. And the only thing that matters to me is the story point clear? And the idea here is that you want to spend as little time as possible actually making animatics so that you can do lots of them and really get it right.
So you went through several revisions, right?
I'm sorry?
You went through several revisions, I'm sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think in the first version of the film, the grandfather died and the kid became a sheep at the end. It was just so convoluted, and there was a whole herd of sheep. So it really is a process of like doing an animatic and then saying what works and throwing away everything else and starting over again and again and again until it works. And I had a lot of classmates at CalArts that would make maybe like one animatic or even 2 or 3, and I just felt like mine wasn't ready after 3. I had to keep going. And I had another classmate named Michael who had made, the year before, had made an award-winning film, and he made like 22 animatics, 22 different versions of his film before he committed to one to produce. And that seemed to me to be like the real key to making a good, solid film. Another huge key for me in making the film is I was really heavily involved with my composer from an early time in the film. So we were having discussions about the film as I was producing animatics, and I would bounce every animatic off him to see what his take was, see what he thought, get the feedback. He recorded over an hour of music, and we ended up using just 3 minutes of it. It was pretty fantastic to collaborate with him, and it made the film a lot better in my opinion.
And this was all done using TV Paint?
Yeah, the film was done in TV Paint. I did the animatic here in Photoshop, and then I used a little bit of After Effects to kind of composite it and give it the movement of camera.
Okay.
But the film, yeah, the film was animated entirely in TV Paint, which I love. It's a super intuitive program. It really works well for animation. And it's just now kind of taking over CalArts in terms of, I think, the preferred method of production for a lot of the students there.
So once you got your animatic locked in, what was your animation process like in terms of time?
Okay, so after I had the animatic locked in, I broke it down into a production schedule. And once you have your animatic locked, it's just a question of being productive. Like, can you get the work done? So I'm a huge fan of spreadsheets. I'm a very organized person in this one specific area of my life. I'm not particularly organized in other places, but so I love to have a spreadsheet and say, this is how many shots I have to do. This is the difficulty of each shot. And this is the day that I'm planning to do them, and this is the deadline. So I really laid it out day by day, and I had a number. I said, I knew I need to finish, I think it was something like 400 or 500 frames of animation per day to meet my goal. And it was just a matter of like buckling down, eliminating distractions, and just doing the work. It was a pretty, I mean, in some respects, a very boring 4 months of production. So I didn't really have a lot of outside influence. It was just me in a room animating the film, and I think that's the best way to go about it for students.
So what do you think is the one thing that you learned, or there may be many things that you learned in terms of making your short film and now your present day job as a story artist at Dreamworks? What are some of the things you learned that really have come to fruition as a story artist at Dreamworks?
That's a great question. It's in a lot of ways it's very different, but in some ways it's exactly the same. I mean, we make animatics here, and we test screen them and we see what's working, and then we go back to the drawing board and redo things a lot. So that idea of story as disposable is something that you don't like. You need to do a good job, but you can't spend too much time because it's meant to be thrown out in favor of the best idea. So I think preparing for that mindset was helpful. I think being aware of scheduling and deadlines was crucial. Like, it's such a tightly run ship here, and I'm such a small part of a bigger machine. Like, if I don't get my stuff in on time, that affects everybody down the line. So understanding the importance of deadlines, I mean, it's not sexy, but that's, I think, a pretty crucial part of the process.
Now, you do the boards, and as far as animatics, it's handed off to an animatic department, or do you actually do somewhat of an animatic or something like a preview? Or
Right. We're really lucky here. We have an entire editorial department on each movie. So we send our boards, once they're done, we pitch them, and then we do fixes, and then when they approve them, we send those boards down to the editorial department. And those guys are incredibly talented. They'll cut them together, they'll add temporary music, scratch dialogue, sound effects, and it feels just like a movie when they're done with it. It's pretty amazing.
that's great. So you won the Academy, the Student Academy Award last year. What was that whole experience like?
It was, it's hard to describe. It was unreal, and it was such a creatively inspiring time. I mean, when people thank the Academy, it's kind of a cliche thing to do, but having gone through that experience, I realized why that is, because the Academy is like this organization that's all about promoting film as an art form, and promoting filmmakers is one of the ways they do that. So it wasn't just an award show and here's your trophy and go home. It was like 4 solid days of inspirational meetings and lectures and panels with directors, writers, cinematographers. I mean, really felt like we had kind of a backdoor entry into the Hollywood system. It was fascinating, really enjoyed it.
So in terms of your education at Cal Arts, how important was learning 2D animation? I know story obviously was super important, but story and 2D animation, can you tell us a little bit about your education and how it prepared you for making your films and even your story job at Dreamworks?
Sure. So I took CG animation at Cal Arts for 2 weeks, and I opened up the graph editor in Maya, and I realized that I would never be interested enough to learn it. I just felt like this is not what I want to be doing. So I focused all my energy on 2D animation, knowing that story is one of the few jobs in today's professional industry that still allows you to draw all day. So I wanted to really focus on drawing and getting better at drawing. And a lot of what I do, I mean, in storyboarding here at Dreamworks is I use the principles of animation all the time. Because we have this editorial department, we have the ability to really flesh out our boards and do a lot of acting poses, a lot of action, and really try to get life and try to get performance out of the characters. And 2D animation skills are crucial for communicating the ideas that you want to with your drawings. Otherwise, they're kind of robotic and stiff. But having that sense of life and that understanding the craft of drawing, I think, is a huge part of what we do here.
You mentioned you met one of our 2D animation instructors, Mike Polvani. Can you tell about that experience? Or
yeah, well, before I went to Cal Arts, I was taking a class at the Animation Guild, and from Alex Topete, and I was just feeling like I wanted to learn about animation. And he had Mike Polvani come in as a guest speaker one day, and I found out that he had worked on Cats Don't Dance, which is one of my favorite 2D features. It's just the looseness and the life in the animation in that film is just astounding. So I have a drawing of Danny, the main character, that he did for me that day, and I still have it somewhere, I'm sure. It was just really cool to kind of see him work and realize that there are people that do this for a living, and it's a possibility to have a career drawing cartoons. It was a really great experience.
So what advice do you have to give to students who want to do their own short films or who want to take a path into the career that you're doing as a story artist?
That's a great question. So many things. More than anything, what it comes down to is desire. Like, how badly do you want to succeed? How badly do you want to make a film? How badly do you want to be a storyboard artist? Because it's a very difficult path. I mean, in some senses, my story is kind of a fairy tale. It's kind of this overnight success. But in others, I mean, I was a theme park caricature artist at Six Flags and Knott's Berry Farm for like 5 years, and those were kind of brutal years. It was a lot of hard work, a lot of drawing things I didn't want to draw for money and trying to get better at my craft in my free time. And it's a tough path, but it's such a great path to be on, and it's so rewarding to do what you love for a living. I can't even tell you. So I would say, if nothing else, like, want it. And I can't. The thing is, I can't. I guess that's advice. I can't make somebody want it, but if you do, you'll find a way to make it happen. It's all about desire.
So are we going to see some more short films coming from you while you're still working at DreamWorks? Are you kind of doing that on the side as well, or?
Yeah, I mean, I love making films, and as much as I love working on movies here at DreamWorks, it's a little bit of a different process to be a small part in a big machine as opposed to being an autonomous filmmaker and being able to make those decisions. So I definitely want to get back to that at some point in the future. The question is, when will you find the time? Because Erie was, 7 months of, 40-hour, 50-hour weeks with no interruptions. And now I'm working 40, 50-hour weeks here at DreamWorks. I don't quite have the free time that I'd like. So I'm working on it in my free time and kind of looking for maybe what the future holds, maybe having a chance to take a break in the future and make a film, or just find a way to be more productive in my free time. But I definitely want to keep making films, that's for sure.
Cool, cool. So where can we see more of your work? And I know you have a Kickstarter that you're doing. Can you tell us a little bit about your website and the Erie project at Kickstarter?
Sure. Well, I can show you my website, which is where it's kind of a good place to follow what I'm up to. I don't post as often as I should, but this is what it looks like. It's got just kind of different. I like to write a lot, so we've got a couple essays about different things. On the films page, it has all my films. This is Russ's Funk, the first film. Erie is my most recent. And then on that page, I have essays that I've written about the film, acceptance speech. Here's some sketches, original character designs from the film. This is the boy and the grandfather. This is an earlier image when they both had wings growing out of their backs, like just kind of weird early stuff. And just the idea of kind of exploring the roots of the movie and where it came from. And then, like you said, I have a Kickstarter project out right now. And what I want to do is make a limited edition print run of my film on a DVD with the purpose of raising money to fund my next short film. So it's right here on Kickstarter, and I won't play it for you, but there's some great rewards. There's posters. This is what the DVD will actually look like. Got this awesome custom sling that I had a friend of mine make, just like the one in the film. So it's kind of a cool chance to connect with me as a filmmaker and also to support my filmmaking journey going forward. So I think Kickstarter is a game changer for independent artists anywhere, and I think it's wonderful. I think students should definitely take advantage of that.
Cool, cool. So let's open up the floor to some students and see what questions we. This one is from Andrew Sharp, who posted on our Facebook, and you may have answered this. I was wondering, hello David, I was wondering what were the softwares you used on your film Erie, and where you used each software from concept art to storyboarding to animating.
So the first technology I use is always pen and paper because it's easy and cheap and it's fast to work out ideas. And I'm not, and with this film especially, I understood that my focus was story. So I didn't really care as much about the finished look of the film. It was more about the story that I was telling. So as soon as I was comfortable with my initial drawings, I took it into Photoshop and did my animatics, which I showed you earlier. And then I used After Effects to take those images and cut them together in time, like a film. And then once it was time to animate, I used TV Paint. I colored the film in TV Paint as well. And then I used After Effects again to do some of the more elaborate camera moves, panning in, moving around the camera. And then I used Final Cut Pro to kind of assemble all those different scenes into one film and use that for editing as well. So that's kind of my software pipeline, I suppose. It's a good question, Andrew.
Cool. Here's another question. I think this is also from Andrew. How long did the whole film take to make, and where was the majority of your time spent boarding or animating? I think you mentioned a little bit about how long it was, but
Yeah, so 7 months, and like I said, 4 months was boarding, and it's a tough 4 months because it's like for 3 months and 27 days the story was not working. So it's kind of like almost 4 months of agony until that. I remember that evening when I realized that the ending matched the story I was telling, and everything had kind of fallen into place, and the relief that I felt. But until that time, it was a very harrowing kind of ordeal. Like, will it work? Will it not work? Like, the ending alone was like, I don't know. A lot of people thought I shouldn't have that kind of an ending, but I felt strongly about it. So, story was crucial. And I say it was 4 months story and 3 months animation and post production.
cool. So Robert Holman says, you're a story artist. What's the input you get from the organization to start your job? A screenplay, a pitch meeting, something else? What kicks that off in terms of where your job begins?
Well, it's a good question, and it really depends on where we are in the filmmaking process. I look at it as kind of a spectrum, and what we call it here at Dreamworks is it's your launch meeting. And on one end of the spectrum, there's my hand. Trying to make this visual. On one end of the spectrum are like really, really loose launches. Like, this character meets this character, and we're not really sure what happens, but they end up falling in love, kind of, and go off and figure out what happens. So that's the loosest possible launch. On the other hand, here's a script page. We like the way it's written. Don't change anything. Make it visual. So you just take that, you break it down into shots and performance, and you give them exactly what they asked for. So in between those two poles, where are my hands? Right there. There's any kind of different gradation, where they might say, here's a script page, but there's a couple of parts we're not sure about. So it really depends. Every launch is different, and that's what makes this job so fun. Is that you never get launched on the same thing twice. I mean, you may get launched on the same sequence, but you might have a different take, a different approach. So it really keeps things fresh in that respect. And then there's also the pitch dates. We have a launch, and then 2 weeks roughly to work on it, and then a pitch where we show what it is that what we've done. So
cool. So here's one from I can't pronounce his name. Wazaku Kwazi. You mentioned you went to CalArts having already gotten a degree before.
yeah.
How important would you say it is to go back to an incredible school like CalArts to start a career, change into animation, as opposed to, say, studying on your own online? Also, how did you manage to go back to school? Did you also work at the same time?
So the question is, how hard is it to go back?
Yeah.
How hard was it?
Yeah, how hard was it? And would you recommend going to a four-year college, or as opposed to studying on your own online?
That's a great question. It's hard to answer because I feel like it's different for everybody, and without knowing his situation, it's hard for me to say. But for me, it was, I moved to California to get into animation, and I tried for 2 years and didn't have any luck. Maybe I wasn't networking hard enough. Maybe I just didn't meet the right people. I don't know what my problem was. So I moved to Santa Clarita, which is where CalArts was located, and I took a tour, and I knew when I walked in that I had to go to this school. I needed to be at this place where people loved storytelling, loved cartoons, loved filmmaking. And then I saw the price tag, and I calculated the amount of debt that it would cost me to go back to school, and I freaked out, and I didn't go. I took a year, and I was a substitute high school teacher. I was teaching art at a high school, and I thought maybe I'll just work on my own stuff in the summers and teach myself. But ultimately, I was laid off from my teaching job, and I kind of forced this moment. And it was also after a time in my life when my father had just passed away. So I kind of came to this moment where it was like, life is short. This teaching door has obviously been closed, and I have a dream that I want to pursue, and there's a cost. If I go to CalArts, it will not be cheap. But at that time, I felt like I was 28, and it was kind of like a now or never kind of thing. And one of the things, I mean, you learn a ton at CalArts. There's so much richness of instruction, both from the teachers and from your peers. But one of the great things that CalArts offers is kind of a direct access to the industry. I think I don't know that I'd be here if it wasn't for CalArts. And I mean, when my film Eerie premiered at the producer show at the end of the year at CalArts, there were people there from Disney, from Pixar, from Leica, and from Dreamworks, which are all the studios that I had dreamed of working at as a feature story artist. And I would not have had the access. I don't know that I could have gotten my film in front of those people who make those decisions about who to hire as easily had I not gone to CalArts. It's not impossible. I have coworkers here that didn't go to CalArts. It's not the only way, but for me, it seemed like the best way at the time. And I don't know. I mean, could I have done the same thing on my own time? You know, working from home, doing online classes. There's a lot of great classes, and I think they're only growing. I mean, both Santosh's school, Concept Design Academy, Schoolism has some great online classes. Animation Mentor. I mean, it's easier than ever to learn from wherever you are in the world, but you also miss out a little bit maybe on the community of being with other artists in person and the energy that comes from that. So it's hard for me to say one way is better, or they're so different. And I guess my way worked for me, but that doesn't mean that it would work for somebody else, or that your way can't work for you. I don't know if that's kind of evading the question, but those are my thoughts.
Cool. Glenn Simsek says, do you deal with the whole story or vignettes in a story?
I assume he's talking about like at Dreamworks?
Yeah, I believe he's talking about Dreamworks.
Mostly vignettes. Every once in a while, they will ask us for ideas like, okay, here's the big picture, and what are some possibilities for how to change the overall story? And then our job is to provide ideas. But for the most part, our job is to fulfill the director's vision. And it's his job to kind of set the vision for what the overall story is. And then when he calls on us, we provide the best possible ideas for that small section that he's asked us to do. So I would say it's probably 90–95% vignette based, and every once in a while you get a chance to kind of take a crack at the overall structure. But movies are so hard to make. I think there's really a danger of having too many cooks in the kitchen in that sense. Like a filmmaker has a vision, and this is an auteur's medium where, you know, the director is the one that sets the vision for the film. So it's important to understand that dynamic, I guess.
Cool. We get another question from Glenn. What other schools have your colleagues gone to?
So I would say the majority come from CalArts, Sheridan College, Art Center College of Design, Ringling down in Florida. I think those are probably the top schools. And a lot of guys come from Gobelins in France, a lot of the animators. And every school kind of has its own strength. And so for example, Art Center is like an art school. It's like the art department, visual development artists typically come from Art Center. This is all a generalization. Animators typically come from Ringling, is one of the better animation schools, or Animation Mentor as far as CG animation goes. CalArts is known for producing filmmakers, in the sense that they make us make a film every year at that school, so you're required to think about film holistically and not just like one small piece of it, like the performance of a character or the painting of a background, but like the whole picture. That's the idea, is that it helps you develop a unique voice as a filmmaker. So every school has a different focus and a different benefit to the student.
Cool. Let's see. I got another question for you. What do you think was a skill set that you wish you could have learned in college that you are kind of learning now, or that you wish you could have learned more of in college or in your education?
That's a good question. Okay, so I feel like a couple things that I'm really learning about now that I didn't know very well in college are how to use the camera in a more dynamic way, like how to use the framing and staging of different shots to comment on the story being told, and not just use the same simple flat staging all the time, but kind of realizing the power that cinematography has to support the story. I think that's something that I was beginning to understand was important to CalArts, but since I've been here, it's just like my head's exploded with the possibilities. Another thing is adjusting to feature film boarding. The hardest thing for me has been being able to communicate depth in a drawing, because feature films are all about, especially here at Dreamworks, all about scale and scope and like vast space and like larger than life experiences. And so many of my storyboards at CalArts were like, all the characters were like within 10 feet of the camera. And I'm learning now like how to draw perspective in a way that makes it feel like there's a big world in the drawing. That's a skill that I think I've really learned a lot since coming to Dreamworks.
Cool. Richard Wilmots asks, given the opportunity, would you rather make a few more shorts or jump into directing a feature?
Wow. I don't know. I don't know, man. Directing is a tough gig. It's a tough gig because you've got to give a lot, and you're responsible for leading an entire group of people. I mean, it's not an easy thing, and I think it's a glamorous thing to be like, oh, I'm a director, you know, that's my job, but it's something that's very difficult to do, and it's not something that I'm entirely sure that I'm ready to do. I'd love to get the chance someday, but there is something really satisfying about the world of the short film, because I can actually conceive of and execute the entire film using myself and a few collaborators, whereas making a CG film is like leading an army into battle. So there's really a different dynamic. I'd love to do both, quite honestly. I don't know if I had to pick one. Maybe shorts right now, just because that's where I feel comfortable. I'd like to get another few shorts under my belt before I actually do direct, to kind of develop my voice and what it is that I have to say, I guess.
Rodney has a question about your animation. He's interested in your approach to animation with regard to pose-to-pose and in-between. Your animation in your short film has a nice, snappy action to it, and you really hit the beats throughout. Did you do anything specific or stylistic to achieve that in your animation?
No. I guess it was just pose-to-pose for the most part. A couple times it was straight ahead. I don't really see myself as an animator. I see myself as a story artist, and I feel like animation is necessary to communicate my story. So I just wanted it to feel realistic and lifelike. I don't think too much about animation or really have much to say about it other than just try to make it look good. That's probably not very helpful, but that's really all I kind of shoot for. Sorry.
Rodney also has another question. Did you use an X sheet or some other approach?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't use an X sheet. I used one my first year, and it just seemed like such a pain. Like it's such a complex thing, and when you're, I don't know. No, so the answer is no. I used it once, and I was like, okay, I get it. It's not for me. I used my animatic as a blueprint and kind of went shot by shot from there. So,
but you had a shot list of things with an Excel spreadsheet of some sort, right?
Absolutely. I wish I had that to show you guys. Maybe I can email it to you later, but that was crucial, and it was just shot by shot. And the cool thing that's maybe helpful for your students is maybe when you have all your shots lined up is to figure out, okay, which ones are the hardest, which ones are kind of medium, and which ones are the easiest. And then the way that you tackle them is you start with this. So if you have every scene a number, 1 for easy, 2 for medium, 3 for hard. And you always start with the medium, because the idea is that you start in a place that's challenging, but you want to get your chops up so that when you're done with your mediums, you're at the top of your game, but you tackle the hard stuff. Then you go to the 3s, and then when it's the end of the film making time and you're like under pressure, then you can knock out those 1s like nobody's business. So it's like 2, 3, 1, kind of that strategy I found helped a lot in making the film.
Cool. Can you tell us a little bit about your process learning story? I know story is an important part of what you're doing. Obviously, you're a story artist, but what would you recommend for somebody who wanted to make a short film or wants to learn story? What's your advice about that?
Okay, the one thing I did that helped me more than anything to understand story and to understand the way that film works was to sit down. I gave myself an independent study class when I was at CalArts, and I sat down in front of a TV for 3 hours once a week, and I watched The Incredibles, which is my favorite film of all time, animated or unanimated, live action, whatever, and I watched it frame by frame, and I drew every shot, and then I drew, when it cut to the next shot, I drew that shot, and then I wrote down, why did they cut here? What's the purpose of this shot? What are they trying to accomplish? And that, for me, taught me so much more than anything else I've done about how to make films. Because here's the crazy thing is that if you want to be a filmmaker, every film ever made is a textbook if you can ask the right questions. Because filmmaking is all about making choices. So if you watch a film slowly and ask yourself, why did he make that choice? Or why did she cut here? Or why is this performance staged in this way? And I'll show you, I'm still doing that today. These are some things I've been doing recently. I love How to Train Your Dragon, so I've been trying to learn more about how they use camera to tell stories. So like I've been doing these studies on my lunch breaks where I just take shot by shot, like what's happening. Oh, sorry, it goes this way. And then I write down like why they're doing things. I write down like what the scene is about, and just kind of trying to study what they're thinking of doing. And that's helped a ton. That's my, without question, the #1 thing you can do, I think.
Have you been studying both animation and live action, or mostly animation?
Yeah, I have. I think it's valuable to study both. I think I've probably studied more animation, which I'm not entirely proud of. I think live action is richer because all of the film language the animation uses is stolen from live action. So I think it's better to have a mix. I think it's dangerous. Like if you look at everything ever made in an animated form is like this circle, and this is like this is the world of animation. Every story's ever been told. It's kind of like a ghetto. And you can get stuck in here if you don't get outside the ghetto once in a while for different influences like live action or fairy tales or whatever. Like you draw your influences from outside of the ghetto, the work that you make will be so much richer as a result. So yeah, I should probably study more live actions to answer your question.
So you learned more by studying film and obviously doing it. Was there any particular books that you could recommend that you felt were helpful in learning your craft of story?
Storyboarding is a hard thing to teach in a book. I mean, there's the classics like 5 C's of cinematography, which is kind of dry, it's kind of textbooky. Film directing shot by shot is a pretty good one. I really enjoy Bruce Bloch's book. I think it's called Visual Structure. He talks a lot about like how to echo the intensity of your story with visual elements. But I mean, any book you can read on filmmaking is going to help you a lot. Sidney Lumet has a great book called Making Movies, which I've reread probably 3 or 4 times. Anything by David Mamet, that guy's a fantastic writer and really thinks about film from a different perspective, being a playwright. But Walter Murch, I think it's called
In the Blink of an Eye?
Yes.
Yeah,
great film. I mean, book. And this is great too. Visions of Light. It's the cinematography documentary. There's also one called The Cutting Edge, which is an editing documentary. But really, I think if you want to be a filmmaker, you have to have a steady diet of really good books and films about filmmaking. And there's so many to choose from. I mean, it's just an embarrassment of riches.
We got another question by Andrew. When you finished your animated scenes, did you drop them into the animatic, or did you animate everything first, then edit the movie?
Yeah, so I had open in Final Cut Pro my animatic on one timeline, and then as I would finish scenes, I would drop them in the appropriate places. So I'd have animatic, and then like one fully animated scene, and then back to the animatic, and then animation. So I could get a feel for how much was done, how much was left to do. That's the way I work.
Cool. Now, in terms of your job as a story artist, you're given a script and then like a couple of pages of script in terms of what you're given, and then you have a certain amount of time to do that? What is your allotment of time? Do you have 2 pages of script and then you have a week to do it, or how long do you get in terms of a sequence? Like if you're given 5 pages, do you have 5 days to do it, or do you have a certain deadline in terms of how much of a script you
Right. I haven't been able to figure out how, like, every launch is different. We had a launch yesterday afternoon, and they want us to pitch tomorrow morning. So that's like the shortest possible. Another one would be like a week and a half to do an entire sequence. I mean, it all depends on how long the scene is and how long it's going to take you to do it. And every scene is different that way. So there's really no kind of set limit. I guess 2 weeks is kind of ballpark for a whole sequence, what they expect for 4 to 5 pages. But I've never experienced that specific relationship of time and assignment. So it depends.
So you mentioned you do pitching obviously quite often. How important is that skill set in terms of learning how to pitch?
It's crucial, but it's funny because we don't do the old school style of pitching where we get up in front of the room and like point at paper and like act it out and have voices and like try to put on a show.
Yeah.
Now it's all done in computer. So I sit at a keyboard and I hit the arrow button and I just kind of provide voices and narration. So you don't have to be like super outgoing people person to pitch well. I think it helps because you have to. The idea is you have to sell your ideas. You have to like communicate what's entertaining about your sequence, and do that any way you can. And it's much harder when you're not up in front of the room. So your drawings have to kind of speak for themselves. But I would say absolutely, pitching is a crucial part of the gig here for sure.
Cool. Let's see if we have any other questions. I have a question, and don't know if you can narrow it down, but what are the 3 skill sets you think are the most important in terms of being a story artist?
The 3 skill sets. I like that. I'll give you 2 skill sets. How's that sound? So I have a coworker who, a couple doors down from me, he was like the 2nd unit director on Spider-Man 3, and he's worked with a lot of great filmmakers, and he's got a long career. Like, he's one of the guys I look up to and be like, man, that guy's really incredible, and I'd love to have a career like his someday. And I asked him the same question, like, what is it about, for guys like me just starting out, what does it come down to? Like, how do you have a long career? How do you be successful in this industry? And he said, well, it's 2 things. Half of it is the skills, which is to say the drawing, the storytelling, whatever, filmmaking, the concrete skills of actually doing the boards. The other half is being nice to work with, like being professional, being a cool guy. And I was shocked because I thought he would say, well, there's this and there's editing and there's. He was like, no, it's 50-50 skills, but it's almost just as if not more important to be cool to work with and like be a good guy and like be nice to people and don't be a jerk face. And it's surprising kind of how many people don't understand that part of it. Not here at Dreamworks, but in the industry at large, I've heard a lot of stories and known a few people where it's just like they don't understand that that's a crucial component. So I don't know if that's a disappointing answer. Maybe they're hoping for more meaty artistic advice, but really it's about being easy to work with because this is a collaborative industry. It's all about working in a group. So.
Cool. Do we have any other questions? Let's see. I have another question.
Cool.
So CalArts obviously was incredibly helpful because of the networking.
Yes.
What would you recommend for people who weren't going to CalArts to network in terms of if they're taking an online school where they don't have those actual physical relationships but maybe have an online relationship, but what would you recommend so that they do get connected to the industry?
Sure. Well, let me be upfront about the fact that I suck at networking. I don't really understand it that well, and I maybe wouldn't have gone to CalArts if I had figured out how it worked earlier. But one thing I would say is that as the animation industry is continually impacted by the growth of the online art world, the art community. With Tumblr and DeviantArt and the blogosphere, I mean, it's so much easier to get your work in front of other people. And so often now, when studios are hiring, they don't even look for portfolios anymore. It's like, send me the link to your blog, send me a link to your website. So the tools for exposure are greater than ever before. But so again, that's half of it, the skill set. You know, having the chops, working on your abilities to actually get the work done in a good way. But the other half is then being social online. This is something I admittedly suck at, but like I have a lot of friends that are great. They comment on a lot of blogs. They form these online relationships. They join communities. They give thoughtful critiques to each other, and there's kind of this sense of an online community. And really what it comes down to is the industry is all about relationships, and it's all about who you know. And if you can find people that you know, and then they get into a studio, then maybe later on, if there's an opening, they'll tell you. So I would say always be kind to people. Don't burn any bridges, and just try to grow that community. And another thing that's cool that I think a lot of people don't do as much as they should is like find somebody who's doing what you want to do, and then just bug the crap out of them. Like if there's a sense of responsibility where if you work in the industry, a lot of people had to help you to get where you are. And I believe that there's a responsibility on everyone who's in the industry to help people that aren't, and to give them feedback and to like show them or help them on the way. You know what I mean? So I would find someone who's doing what you want to do and get in touch with them, ask them questions. You know, don't be a jerk and don't be annoying. Be like, hey man, I really enjoy your work. I want to do what you do for a living. Tell me how to do that. Look at my stuff and give me some feedback. And that's great, because if you build that relationship and then you do the work and they're impressed by your work, all of a sudden you're on their radar and you've built that relationship to get a foot in the door. I think that's probably the best advice I could give. I didn't do enough of that. I did a little bit of that when I was in college, but I could have done so much more. And maybe it just seems like that now because I'm inside and I realize how nice everybody is, but people want to help you, you know, you just got to ask for it.
Yeah, I know. I heard, I met Phil Craven, who's the head of story over, I don't know what project he's on, but he had met Rudolfo online.
Really?
And that's kind of how that relationship, and he started as, I think, a storyboard revisionist, and then I think Rudolfo saw how good he was in story, and, you know, he ended up, you know, doing one of the pivotal scenes in Kung Fu Panda, which is great. And then he ended up being, I think, head of story on Kung Fu Panda 2, right? So.
Yeah, talk about meteoric rise, all from an online relationship. It's pretty amazing, right?
Yeah, it's pretty wild. So I think that is it in terms of our questions. If you guys want to watch this again, we will have this up on the site shortly, probably Monday, possibly Sunday, but look for it on Monday. Thanks again, David, for spending your time and giving us some advice and talking about your short film.
Yeah, thanks so much. It was really a pleasure. Thanks for the great questions, and good luck. Keep working. Work hard and do good work.
All right, thanks, David.
Thanks.